In today's live lesson, we're going to be talking about 3 different ways to make your ukulele playing sound much smoother. And really what this is it's some concepts of legato, which is really to play with smoothness, to make notes ring into each other and to make your ukulele playing just sound better and more polished. And so these 3 different concepts are going to use 3 different things. We're going to be talking about our playing hand, we're going to be talking about our fretting hand, and we're going to be talking about our eyes as well. But to start with this, I want to start by talking with the playing hand. And it's kind of cool because this is a pretty basic, easy way to start seeing how your playing can get a lot less choppy by just looking at when you're touching the string. So I'm going to bring the camera down. It's going to look something like this. So I'm going to take my thumb, and if you're playing right now at home, go and grab your ukulele, take your thumb, and just pluck your first string, the A string here. And just pluck it as you normally do. Some people might do it like I'm doing here. Other people might do this. Now, a lot of people do this without even realizing what this is. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because getting a really smooth tone involves making sure that your instrument sustains really well. And to get good sustain, what you need to have happen is you need these strings to continue to ring as long as they can. And in this case, I'm playing an open string, so there's nothing that's affecting the vibration of the string except for my playing hand here. And when I play this with my thumb, if my thumb does not touch that string again, it's going to continue to ring and sustain until it naturally decays. But if I were thinking, well, I got to play my A string again, sometimes people preload their playing hand back onto the string because they're getting ready to play the note a second time. So maybe what you're playing goes like this. See, I played that note twice consecutively. Well, sometimes people do that and they might go like this. And the reason is because they're mentally preparing to play that note a second time by initiating contact with the finger on the string. However, if you do that, you get that choppy sound. To smooth it out, what you want to make sure you do is you strike the string and then you leave the finger away until that moment where you're about to play it again. I'm going to super zoom in here. What I'm talking about with this is this proximity here of the thumb to the string. You can see here I'm touching the string, right? Here I'm not. And so when I play this string and I want to play it twice in a row, for instance, I do not go like that. I actually go like this. So you'll notice that I strike the string and then I bring the thumb back up, but I do not touch the string. There's a gap there between the finger to the string. That's a big trick to getting a smoother sound. And it's a really easy thing to do conceptually. In practice, it could be quite challenging if you haven't done this before. But you can try playing just a simple line, for instance, and you can see I'm just playing open on my A and then 3 on my A, open, and then going to the 3rd fret there. And you can hear how much smoother this sound is by not initiating contact with that thumb. It also goes when you're doing fingerstyle too, when you're finger picking, whether you're using just 2 fingers or 3 fingers or 4 fingers, it doesn't really matter. The concept of preloading the fingers on the strings can be efficient at times, but it also can be detrimental to tone if that string needs to continue to vibrate. So if I'm pluck, for instance, my G, then my C, then my E, then my A, using my thumb, then my index, then my middle, then my ring fingers, if I want to do that again and again and kind of sequence it, and I go like this, and see how I'm kind of putting the fingers back on? See how disruptive that is to the vibration because the fingers touching the strings causes that string vibration to cease. So if I'm going to play this, it's going to look like this. See how I'm preloaded to start because nothing's ringing yet. But if I'm going to play down and continue through, you'll see that my fingers are not touching the strings until the moment that they're striking the strings. They will hover nearby. They'll stick as close as they can, but they're not going to initiate contact with the string until they're ready to deliver on that contact, because any touching of the strings disrupts the vibration of what's being played. I'm going to bring the camera back out to a wide shot and then up to me. This is a really important first step to playing with that sort of legato sound, playing smoother, is making sure that your playing hand does not initiate any sort of contact with the strings unless you're ready for that string to stop vibrating. And there are times you want to do that. Sometimes we want to play with what's called a staccato feel, where we want something to be super short. When we want that, it's okay for that thumb to initiate the contact to stop the vibration of the string because we want it. But when we don't want it, we want to keep it away for that reason, right? So that's the playing hand's role. Whether you're finger picking or using just your thumb, we want to make sure that we don't touch the strings with the playing hand until we're ready to strike the strings with the playing hand. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the bigger concept today, and that is the fretting hand, right? So there's a few different things that we want to break down with the fretting hand, right? With the playing hand, we talked about thumb picking and finger picking. With the fretting hand, bringing the camera down, we want to first talk about just the when we make a movement. And this is something that most players struggle with, because what they do is they'll play a chord. So let's say that you play like a G7 chord, which is the middle finger here on the second fret of the C string, index here on the first fret of the E, and ring finger here on the second fret of the A. And let's say that you're going from this chord to then, an F chord, for instance, right? Which is moving these fingers to here. Middle finger here on the second fret of the G string, and index finger here on the first fret of the E string. If I'm going between these two chords, a lot of times people do this. You hear the disruption of tone that's created there. Why is that? Well, when I play that G7, I play it. And then for a lot of people, they think, I played it, I'm done. I need to think about the next chord that's coming, which is the F. So I'm going to take off my middle finger. I'm going to move my fingers around. And that's where the air comes into play. Is what you want to do is you want to move your fingers at the last possible moment to still get to the next place in time, but to importantly give yourself the most opportunity for those notes to continue ringing. This is such an important step to playing, because what it does is it allows that sustain to continue working. You'll see that when I make this movement, it's very concise. I'm trying to wait to the last possible moment. And to go with that, with like this G7 to F progression, you can start to see we don't need to move what we don't need to move. What I mean by that is, if you're used to playing a chord, taking all the fingers off and then putting the fingers back on, then every two chords you're going to do that same thing. It's going to get that same sort of choppy tone. But when you think about moving the fingers at the last possible moment, you start to think about, do I need to move the finger? And look at this index finger right here. When it goes from the G7 to the F, it doesn't have to move, does it? There's no reason for me to bring pressure off of this finger because it's pressuring on both of them. So I'm going to leave the pressure there. We'll talk more about leaving pressure in a moment. But this is kind of cool, because now what we're seeing is that index finger is sort of this pivot point between the two chords, and I can hold this to the last possible moment, and then when I need to move, I take this finger off and move this finger up, and it works out really nicely. It's a good thing to practice to get good legato sound, good smooth sound with. It's just going back and forth between your G7 and your F, trying to make sure it rings as long as you can. So as we go through this is great with chords, but a lot of times we're playing individual melody notes, right? And so let's play a little melody real quick. Let's play 3 on the A string, and then 2 on the A string, and then 0 on the A string. And let's make this as smooth as we can. So 3 on the A, I'm going to use my ring finger. 2 on the A, I'm going to use my my middle finger. And then open on the A string, fretting it with nothing. So if we play this, and I don't consider my playing hand, like we talked about before, I might... All right, that's no good, so we want to make sure we're not touching it with the playing hand, just like we talked about at the start of the lesson. But there's another step here. So this is wrong, like this. Hear how it's a little choppy? I'll do that again. Versus this. Hear how much richer that sound was? Why is that? Well, the reason is because the distance between a finger coming off to a finger coming on can be a really choppy instance within your playing. And the way to fix that is to look at what's happening and what you can do to diminish the time between the two notes. And in this case, when I play this 3 with my ring finger, if I do anything in front of the number 3, it's going to disrupt the vibration of this string, right? So if I play it and then touch the string, that'll make it stop. If I play it and then I put my pinky somewhere up here, it's going to make it stop. If I play it and reduce the pressure with the ring finger, it's also going to make it stop, right? But my next note is 2 on the A. So if I take this middle finger and I place it on 2, I'm still fretting the 3. Listen. It makes no difference. This is something that we like to do when we're fretting. We actually like to set the fingers that come before what's being played, before we need to play that note, so that it's ready to go. Because now, look, I play the 3, I add the 2, and now when I'm ready to play this 2, all that I have to do is take this finger off and play. I'm no longer trying to do a takeoff and a place on and play all at the same time. I'm no longer juggling the 3 different things. I'm instead only juggling the 2 by having that finger preset. And if you've ever juggled something before, it's a lot easier to juggle 2 than it is 3, right? So this concept is really important to getting that smoother sound, is setting your fingers on your fretting hand before you need to play the note, as long as it doesn't disrupt the vibration of that note that's being played. And again, this is one of the most important concepts I'll ever show you in a video, is this concept of just setting the finger before as you're playing. And so you'll see really good players will do this all the time. They very rarely do something like that. Here, I even misfretted it there. You can see my index being placed before can really help make these transitions much smoother and much easier. So whenever you're playing a melody on something, look at that and see if you can place the fingers on earlier, because doing that will help immensely. So we've got 2 concepts so far with the fretting hand, right? We've got moving at the very last moment, making sure that we're not taking the fingers off and taking our sweet time as we go. And then we've also talking about putting the fingers on in position beforehand when we can. Another thing that I mentioned earlier was like maintaining pressure, right? We talked about like that F chord and G7, how the index can just maintain pressure. That doesn't just work here. It also works when we're moving from a chord to another chord, even where not all of the notes are the same, but one of the fingers might be on the same string. So my favorite thing to show this with, and this is a little bit more advanced than the other things we talked about, but same concept, is if I play a G chord, 0, 2, 3, 2 with my index, ring, and middle fingers, and then I play this really cool A minor 7 chord that's 0, 4, 5, 3. Middle finger on the 4th fret of the C string, ring finger on the 5th fret of the E string, index finger on the 3rd fret of the A string. If I'm going from this chord and the G chord kind of back and forth, most people might do something like this. See, I'm kind of taking the fingers off and putting the fingers on. I might be trying to do it at the last possible moment, but I'm still kind of making it a little bit choppy. So what I look for is there any common note? Are any of these notes the same? And I mean, the G string that doesn't help us a whole lot, right? Because we're not fretting that one. We can let it ring out. That's not nothing. But no, every single one of these notes changes. So now I look at, does every finger change its position? Well, the index goes from the C string to the A string, and the middle finger goes from the A string to the C string. However, this ring finger here, right? See my ring on it? Do you see how that's on the E string on the 3rd fret? And then it ends up on the E string on the 5th fret. There's no reason to take this finger off of the fretboard as I make this transition. In fact, it behooves me in every single way to leave this finger on the 3rd fret, and not just leave the finger on the string, but leave the pressure on the string as well, and kind of slide it up to that 5. I'm not so much trying to get a really strong slide sound, but a little incidental slide that can be created here helps make this sound so much smoother and so much nicer for the tone. Isn't that cool? And there are lots of instances like this. Maybe I go to an F chord like this with my middle finger coming up 1 fret, right? Go to a G by moving all 3. All of these different movements as I go up, it's trying to keep whatever fingers are currently engaged with the strings to continue being engaged to the strings, so that I can get that nice sort of slide type of sound. Bringing the camera back up. It's not about trying to slide and trying to get that really strong embellishment sound. No, it's more about bridging one thing into the next. And any commonality you can have between the two things helps create a much smoother tone, right? And so by doing this with the fretting hand, by maintaining the pressure on the string and moving it to the next one, you can get this really good seamless tone. And it's this being combined with the other things that makes it so magical, right? Because these 2 concepts we've talked about, or rather, these several concepts over these 2 hands, if you're making sure that you strike the strings and you let them continue to ring with the playing hand and don't initiate contact until you have to play again, that's going to help. And now combine that with on the fretting hand, making sure that you're removing the fingers at the last minute. You're not trying to take them off too early, and making sure that you're putting fingers on early if you can. What I mean by that is if I'm playing a note and I can place my finger on without impacting the tone at all, like if I play this 3 and I want to play the 2, that helps immensely, right? And then the other thing there of having the commonality of the fingers for movement, like if a finger is on the same string, leave it on. Don't take the pressure off. Let it kind of ring between the 2 different ones. Or if it's going to move to a different position, try to keep it engaged with the string. These are a lot of things to work on. These are a lot of things to start juggling. And especially if you're a newer player with this stuff, this will feel completely overwhelming. Don't focus on doing it all at once. Just focus on finding one thing that you can work on. Maybe that first thing is the first thing we talked about with that thumb playing the open string and not striking it again until you're ready. Getting more improvement with that will allow you to get more improvement with other stuff too. This is not an all or nothing deal. It's just an always something that we're looking for, right? But these are just the first 2 hands, or our 2 hands, the first 2 concepts. I introduced a third concept here too, which is our eyes. So this is a little bit trickier in some ways, because what the eyes are going to depend on is a familiarity and memorization of whatever it is that you're working on and playing. This is where a lot of people go wrong with their ukulele playing to create a smooth sound, is they're reading a tab, and I've got nothing against that, right? I want to make it very clear. I'm a firm believer in using tablature, music notation as well, whatever you need. I'm a very visual learner, so I needed all this to learn the ukulele. But the goal is that you use the tab until you can get comfortable with playing not necessarily the whole song, but a part of the song, a part that you can memorize, that you can play by heart, and then get rid of the tab. Put it away. Not necessarily all the time. It's okay to revisit, make sure you're playing things correct. But for this exercise, put it away. Because what I want you to do is I want you to use your eyes to see what you're doing, not looking at what the tab is, but looking at what you're doing with your ukulele playing. A lot of times when I'm in a private lesson with somebody and I ask them to play something, they'll be like, okay, let me get the tab out. And then they pull open the tab, they put it on the music stand, and then they start playing their thing, right? And it looks like this. I wasn't right. What was it? See where I'm going with this? They're looking at the tab, then they glance at their ukulele to make sure they get to the right point or whatever it is, and then they're right back looking at the tab. It's like 90% plus of their visual problem-solving skills are looking at numbers on a chart and trying to decode that in their brain for their fingers to play. But if you want to get a really smooth sound, that visual element can be wonderful to look at what you're playing and analyze those movements so that you can see, oh, my finger raised its pressure off a little bit there, or oh, my finger initiated contact that disrupted the vibration of the string. That's no good. Or oh, I didn't place that finger on the string beforehand. That's not good either, right? It's looking towards what we're doing with our eyes and trying to pay extra close visual attention to what it is. For me, this was the biggest secret to getting a really smooth sound, is when my eyes were able to look more at what I was doing and correspond that with what I was hearing, I was able to actually elevate my tone, because I was no longer concerning myself with what the tab is saying, but rather concerning myself with how I'm playing it. In a lot of ways, it was no longer looking at what notes to play, but rather I'm looking at how to play those notes. And so this is an overwhelming concept if you're somebody who plays with music, because it's like, I need my music, right? And the trick to that is just start small. You don't have to play a whole piece of music. You don't even have to play a whole section of music. You could play one bar of music or a few notes. But if you're looking at what you're playing and you're focusing your mental energy, your visual mental energy on where the frets are being touched, how the pressure is being maintained, how the movements are sliding from place to place, how the playing hand is striking the strings and preparing to strike again without hitting the strings. These are all of the different things that just help so immensely for your playing ability and will help make you such a smoother player and more precise, more polished player as you're going. These are not easy concepts. These are not quick fix concepts. These are things that take lots of time and lots of energy. But if you're really serious about getting the best tone you can with the ukulele, these concepts are going to be really valuable for you on your journey. And I know this because they were super valuable for me on my journey, and they've been super valuable for pretty much all of my students I've ever have had. We've used these concepts in one way or another to make their playing sound more polished, because it sounds so nice when we get that buttery sound. It's just too nice. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments right now. If you're watching this as a recording, we do these every second Tuesday of the month here on Rock Class 101, and you can catch them live, or if you cannot catch them live, there's always forum posts that you're able to leave your comments and questions in. I'll make sure I answer them here when we're doing this live. I'm going to look see if there are any comments in there, as well as comments on the forums as well. But let me go ahead and just start looking here to see what comments there are. It looks like Monty Montgomery says, sorry, I have to go. I'm watching the replay. Excellent. Looking forward to hearing what you think, Monty. Always nice to see your name in here. Let's see. There's a couple comments here. Vicky says, I have trouble with finger picking while playing chords. I stop the ringing of the chord when I place the next chord. How to fix that? And so, yeah, it's a combination effort, right? So trouble finger picking while playing chords, stop the ringing of the chord when I place the next chord. So it's making sure that the playing hand doesn't touch the strings. I don't think that's your problem with it, but sometimes it is. But I think the biggest one with that is finding which fingers can stay the same and then making the movement really quick, right? Because if I'm playing like my G7 to F chord, you can hear that I get pretty good tone with it. And the reason is because I'm making the switch fast, but I'm also making sure that like this string right here is left on as I go between it. So that continues to ring. And you hear how that's not disrupted, right? Not every chord progression is going to have that though. If I'm going from a G chord to an F chord, for instance, it doesn't have that. And that's why I generally don't try to pick chords that don't have any common. But when you're finger picking, another little trick that you can do, this is a little bit more advanced but really relevant, is look at the pattern that you're playing and identify what is the last note that you're playing and then what is the first note that you're playing. So let's say in your finger picking pattern, the last note you play is like your A string. And let's say the first note that you play is maybe like your E string, right? So if I'm doing a pattern that goes like, right, something like that, I might actually play this, or excuse me, I said last note. So this is the first note, and that as the last note. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this G chord and I'm going to build it to the next chord, the F chord, according to how I'm playing the finger picking pattern. If the last note I'm playing is the A string, that's going to be the last note I move. So in this case, what I'm going to try to do, if my E string is the first, I'm actually going to place this 1 on the E string and play that, and then move this finger only after I've played it. So that can give me this sort of And what I'm doing there, bringing the camera back up, is I'm prioritizing fretting notes that are going to be played early and holding notes that are played late. So that way I get sort of the bridge from one chord to the next. And a lot of times when finger picking, for the first note of a pattern, I might be playing half of the old chord with half of the new chord, right? And at the end, the same sort of deal, right? I'm holding that last note before I switch over. All of these things happen in an instant, but that instant is what creates the difference between a good sustained tone and a something that's going to be a little bit choppier. So hopefully that answers your question a bit with it. But let me go ahead and look at other questions here, especially on the Rock Class forums. Make sure I got that pulled up correct. Always some great questions left there. Again, for anyone catching this and wondering why the time was different, I'm so sorry. I was sick when it was supposed to go live, and that hopefully won't happen again. But It's the wonderful thing about live streaming on the internet is the flexibility can be there. But looks like there's the Bubble Bard. It says one way to make your ukulele playing sound better is to attach googly eyes to it, so it serves the dual function of a tambourine. That is actually true on my uke. You can hear the eyes softly rattling sometimes. Whatever works, right? You know, there's no right or wrong way to do this. One of the fun things about like making your ukulele playing sound better is, what does that even mean, right? You know, it's subjective. Playing more smoothly, as I mentioned at the start of this, I think is such an important step to making things sound better, because it just sounds more polished and more professional. But hey, if the rattling eyes do it too, that's good to go. Then she also says, really looking forward to this topic because I'm not always happy with how my playing sounds. How do you make trills sound better? Very specific question. Thank you 100%. Trills usually are going to have to do with hammer-ons and pull-offs, you know, that type of thing. And sometimes it is going right with the technique we talked about with our fretting hand, making sure that the finger is engaged before you're playing the next one. Because if I'm going to do a trill from like 2 to 3, if I'm trying to do it like this, that's not going to work so well. But if I do it like this, it works much better, because this index finger here on the 2nd fret, it doesn't affect the middle finger on the 3rd fret at all, right? The 3rd fret affects the 2nd fret, right? Because this is, if I'm playing this note and I set this on, it's going to stop vibrating. But this note being set on doesn't impact that one at all. So starting to think like that, while tricky, is really, again, beneficial for ukulele playing. So just to kind of sum up what we've talked about here, we're talking about how to play more smoothly with the ukulele to create a more polished professional sound. And we talked about 3 aspects, each with their own concepts. The first aspect was our playing hand. Make sure that when you're playing, especially when you're thumb picking or finger picking, that you don't preload the fingers on the strings unless you want the strings to stop vibrating, because when you touch the string, it stops ringing. So if I want to play a note and then play a note again, I want to make sure that I give it as much time as I can to ring before that thumb initiates contact for the 2nd time. Same deal with finger picking, same exact concept. Keep the fingers close to the strings, but make sure you don't quite touch them. The other concept we talked about is our fretting hand. And with that, we talked about moving at the last minute, trying to get really efficient with movements so that we're not sitting there waiting for a new one to be played. We also talked about keeping fingers on the strings when they can, like going from an F to a G7. This index finger doesn't have to move. No pressure has to be raised off of it at all. It can hold the same amount of pressure. That creates a continued resonance, which is really nice. The other thing that we talked about there is making sure that that finger that's already there, if you're moving it to a different part on the same string, it's totally fine to leave the pressure on as you move from one position to the next. And the last concept there with the fretting hands was, if we're playing a note behind, preload it. It's okay with that particular case, because when I'm playing 3 on the A, if I fret 2 on the A, it doesn't impact the 3 at all. But if I'm going to play 2 right after it, it's ready to go. And that's such a convenient thing to have happen. So fretting things early behind the notes that you're playing is a great way to get a smoother sound. And to go with both of these concepts, the other thing we talked about is our eyes. Get comfortable memorizing songs where you're not looking at tab, you're not looking at screen, you're not looking at video. You're rather able to just look at what you're doing, looking at your playing hand play, looking at your fretting hand fret, and getting really comfortable with identifying the motions. Because if you can visually see what you're doing and tie that to what you're audibly hearing, that's it. That's what the whole point of all this is. And that's what we're looking for as we're practicing. So, well, I hope this has been helpful for everybody who's watched. Again, we do these live streams every 2nd Tuesday of the month. So I hope to see you at the next one here on Rock Class 101. Thank you again. Leave any questions that you might have in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.